Bobby Miller was not good. Is it time for his season or his potential postseason roster spot to be in jeopardy? We'll get into that. We'll talk about more. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. This is a daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers, and you can make that easier on yourself by subscribing and get notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live like we are here a little bit later on Wednesday night. If this is your first time listening or watching, welcome. My name is Vince Samperio. That's Jeff Snyder. We've been doing this podcast here for 6 seasons now. We've been covering the Dodgers in various ways for a decade now. And, through that decade, we've written about the Dodgers, talked to Dodger players, talked to other people involved with the Dodgers, watched a lot of Dodger games, seen a lot of Dodger games, and, these are not the fun games to talk about, but as we move forward and get into the later part of this season, sometimes these games are maybe not necessary the way it kind of played out, but a little bit necessary in order to make some roster decisions a little bit easier rather than harder, I guess.
Yeah, it was a rough one tonight, and I guess the silver lining is that it was rough from the start, and so it wasn't a stressful game. It was just a clunker. So I did some chores around the house with the game on, and obviously doing the podcast, I don't really have the option of just turning the game off. I would suspect that a lot of Dodger fans just turn the game off tonight, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable approach to this. But yeah, Bobby Miller had a really rough night, a really rough first inning, honestly. After that, he was solid. He had a lot of strikeouts. I thought it was interesting in his post-game interview. He was almost a little defiant, saying that they weren't bad pitches. The Angels just good fastball hitters, and he did kind of acknowledge at the end, I probably didn't throw him where I should have, but he never did cop to making bad pitches, really. And it's true. It's not like they were right down the middle. They weren't awful pitches, but it almost felt like, and this is just my perception of what he said, and not really an accusation. Like I haven't gone back and looked to see how often he shook off Austin Barnes, but it felt a little bit like he was, because he said pitch selection wasn't good. The almost felt like he was throwing his catcher under the bus a little bit. And maybe he wasn't. Maybe he did shake off to some pitches. I saw in the chat before we even started, Tyler was talking about how it seemed like maybe he was only comfortable with the fastball at the start of the game. So maybe he did shake to the fastball sometimes. I don't really know, but whatever the reason, whether he's blaming himself or the catcher or just, the cosmic aura or whatever, he felt like he made some decent pitches and the Angels just put good swings on it. And that does happen sometimes. And, he got squozen in the first batter of the game. He walked him. He should have not walked him. But then you hit a batter and then give up a hit, and then you give up a 3-run homer. There's only so much you can blame the umpire for that,
Yeah, if you get squeezed, unless you got squeezed on 4 pitches, you still issued a walk at some point. It's hard to be perfect, but realistically, that
there were 2 bad calls in that at bat, and so including the last pitch should have been strike 3, and they called it ball 4. So, but yeah, it was after that, you can't let it implode like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing. The numbers prove it, maybe not as much as we think, but anecdotally for sure, it feels like Bobby Miller has or is capable of having one of these blow up innings every time out, and it'll be 4 decent innings and 1 blow up inning. It'll be 5 decent innings and 1 3-run inning, or whatever the case is. And this one happened to be the first inning. And yeah, it's September 4th. The Dodgers have 20 some games left. Bobby Miller, if he would remain in the rotation, would only have 4 or 5 starts left. And, I don't think even in some of the outings where he's done better, he hasn't been good. He's been okay. He's been decent. Nothing to really make me want to watch him pitch, more or in October. And I think that's kind of where we're at. And also, he might have had a couple better outings than Buehler in this run since him and Buehler both came back. But the fact that Buehler's steadily improved and the fact that Buehler has a track record in October for whatever that means, it was, a surgery ago. But for me, it's just, we'll talk about later about some guys maybe coming back. But, I think Bobby Miller, if we do see him again, it won't be in a role that's starting, or it won't be in a start that really matters.
Yeah, and we'll probably dig into that a little bit more in the next segment. We're talking about Yoshinobu Yamamoto coming back because somebody's losing a rotation spot over that. But I thought it was interesting in Dave Roberts' post-game interview, he talked about how last year Miller was better at getting the first batter of an inning out than he has been this year. And we've known, even since he was a prospect, the one big knock on him was that he wasn't as good with runners on base, wasn't as good pitching from the stretch as he was from the windup. And both of those things play out this year. I was looking at his splits from last year, and last year, first batter of an inning, only had a 287 on base percentage against him. And last year, even with men on base, he only allowed a 701 OPS, which is still higher than you would expect a superstar pitcher to be. But then you compare it to this year, first batter of an inning, last year, 287 on base percentage, this year, 413. And that was coming into today. And then last year with guys on base, 701 OPS allowed, this year, 953. So he's been much worse at getting the first guy out in an inning, and he's been much worse once there's runners on base. And so just shooting himself in the foot constantly, I really do think for him, his only chance to contribute to the team at this point will be in relief. And that's only if he does pick up a couple miles an hour coming out of the bullpen, knowing he's only throwing one inning. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they put him in that role either in the big leagues or in AAA and say, okay, go see. If you're throwing 101 out of the bullpen, maybe it doesn't matter that you're not commanding the fastball very well. Maybe it doesn't get hit as hard at 101 as it does at 98. And, and then see if he can earn that spot for a bullpen role, because the fact is there are bullpen spots available. Nothing is really locked down in the bullpen. He could still surprise us, but we had already decided, and I assume the Dodgers internally, deep down inside, had already decided Bobby Miller wasn't going to be one of their postseason starters. But it's etched in stone at this point.
Yeah, and you've talked about it before with the fastball being, not his strongest pitch. And yeah, when you throw 99, it's cool when you have a changeup to play off of, when you have a curveball to play off of, when you have other pitches to play off of. And then you can place the fastball and you can get by with a ball that doesn't move that much, but it's 99 miles an hour. When you can't locate those other pitches or you don't have a feel for it and you want to lean with the fastball, your fastball is not that good, and you're going to really have to have the command. And when you don't have that, this is what happens. And I think that's kind of what he's falling into. And like you mentioned, bullpen, I think it's maybe overdue and overdue in the fact of, it should have already happened, but the fact that the Dodgers have had, Kershaw go down recently, Glasnow went down recently, Yamamoto hadn't come back yet. Like this was a little bit more out of necessity than anything else of him continuing to start. But yeah, 101, you can get away with, misplacing and or relying on it a little bit more. It's still going to get hit at times, as we've seen with other pitchers that throw 100, but you have a little bit more margin for error where you don't have that here. And for Miller, it's disappointing. Like this season's disappointing all in all. And if he doesn't find that relief role, or the Dodgers don't give him a chance in that relief role, or whatever the case is, I think there's definitely some, big things he has to come and work on in the offseason in order to get better, whether it's focusing on 3 pitches being really good and, location rather than having all these other pitches, whether it's refining we got excited last year and then this year happened and now you don't know what to expect out of Bobby Miller moving forward.
Yeah, it's been rough. But there is light on the horizon. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is coming back on Tuesday. It'll be an interesting situation because he's not super built up. So we'll dig into what that means for him, what it means for the rotation, all that. So thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Wait, you're supposed to be going to the ad. I'm doing the transition. You can read the ad, okay? Please keep it Locked On Dodgers, folks.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And take advantage in September. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks. Every week in September, that's right, 1 yard gets you an automatic win. And if you put that together with one other player stat projection that you get right on more or less, boom, that's a win. That's cash or money or whatever in your account. It's coming back to you. So make sure to go check that out because it's gone when September ends. And remember, right now, you can go to Prize Picks, download the app, use the code LOCKEDONMLB, and you get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So go join the Prize Picks app, download it, be a member, enjoy all the things that go on in September and other days of the week. And Prize Picks, run your game. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and get notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live like we are here on Wednesday night. You can check out Locked On MLB Podcast for another listen of your day with our pal Sully bringing you his humor and insight and knowledge, getting you ready for the postseason and beyond. So make sure to go check out the Locked On MLB Podcast wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, which also brings you Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 2 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube, bringing you the biggest news and stories from the sports world and the LA sports world. The Locked On Dodgers postcast with host Pete Fox is available on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel live after most Dodger games and in our audio feed. All right, Jeff, we got encouraging news on one end and really good news on another end. The encouraging news was that Tyler Glasnow has continued to progress. He's going to throw a bullpen session coming up, and then they will move from there. So that's exciting. But the big news is that Yoshinobu Yamamoto is coming back to the Dodgers to pitch at Dodger Stadium this coming Tuesday. And while he's not built out yet, we don't know exactly what we expect of him or what the Dodgers expect of him. You got to imagine 3-4 innings, maybe 60 pitch count or something like that. Regardless, it's him on the mound for the Dodgers and hopefully getting ready for October.
Yeah, he threw 53 pitches, I think, in his last rehab start. And so usually they bump up by 10 or 15 each time. So maybe as high as a 70 pitch count. But yeah, we're probably looking at 4 innings or so. And two interesting things that will come from this. One is that somebody gets bumped from the rotation. We also found out today that Landon Knack will be taking Clayton Kershaw's spot in the rotation. He'll be starting on Friday. And so, realistically, based on what we've seen, Bobby Miller is the obvious odd man out. Also, he has options available. And so as far as the active roster goes, seems like a Yamamoto for Miller swap is pretty straightforward. They will have to make a 40-man roster move because Yamamoto has been on the 60-day IL. And that's where it gets more interesting because Brent Honeywell had been DFA'd before, and then they re-added him to the 40-man roster to bring him up last week. And I had kind of assumed at the time it would be a short-term thing and they would DFA him again when the time came. But with Yamamoto pitching and only going to go 4 innings, you kind of want Honeywell's depth there because really Honeywell and Michael Grover, they're only multi-inning relievers on the roster right now. Well, plus Michael Peterson. But that leads me to the rest of this sentence, which is that Michael Peterson probably has no business being on a major league roster at this point. And this late in the season, realistically, probably might as well be DFA'd to make that spot on the 40-man roster. So you keep Honeywell's length and you drop Peterson, which then you can either call up, I don't even remember which other relievers they have in the minors right now. Because if you're sending Bobby Miller down too, then you bring up another reliever. But all in all, seems like Michael Peterson is probably that 40-man roster move, don't you think?
Yeah, that makes the most sense in the sense of the active roster. I guess if you really wanted to try this Bobby Miller thing, you could have him piggyback Yamamoto. But again, he hasn't been effective, so that's not necessarily a role you really want, not knowing what you're going to get from Yamamoto. Like, it'd be an unknown with another unknown, and that could be,
especially because the point of sending Miller to the bullpen is to see how much he can gain in a 1-inning stint. So he's not that role wouldn't really be a piggyback role anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we think that they might.
Yeah.
They could potentially want him in the piggyback role. Maybe. I don't think so. I don't think Bobby Miller really fits in anywhere, but we'll see what happens. But for Yamamoto, like, yeah, it's been a lot longer than we thought. Yeah, it's not an ideal timing in sense of getting built up. But, at this point for Yamamoto, if you're one that maybe believes he only has so many bullets left, maybe only having a couple of starts before a postseason is not too bad. And you can kind of hold in and really let out in October, because it's tough, because if he comes out and does not pitch well, like, do you bank on him? Do you still throw him out? Like, it's the Dodgers are in a weird spot where if Yamamoto doesn't work out, you're looking at a lot of trouble.
Yeah, for sure. They're counting on him, and I think that's part of why they are bringing him back even before he's fully built up, because they could wait and let him get built up in the minors, but I think they want to see, like, the building up will happen as it happens, but they need to see how effective can he be against big league teams, because that's if he's less effective, because what we saw when he was healthy this year is he was effective basically just about every game other than that first game in Korea. And so if that version of Yamamoto is still what they have, okay, then they can, well, we'll get you built up between now and the postseason. That's fine. But I think they are kind of anxious to see what he can do against big leaguers. I don't know if you saw that comment from BC. He says Dave Roberts said that Bobby Miller will start next week. That might just be saying it after the game, because the alternative is making a public pronouncement that Miller is being demoted, and it's easy enough to say that and then change your mind later.
Did he say for the Dodgers?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. He could start in Oklahoma City.
Right.
So, but and somebody else in here, Young, makes a good point. Brusdar Graterol is probably getting close to coming back, although he didn't have a great rehab stint the other night. But he might be that other roster move when Yamamoto comes back too, if they're sending Miller down and DFAing Michael Peterson. Brusdar Graterol, the only other real one who's an option is probably Ben Kasperius, and he probably can't come up for a little bit longer, just due to rules from when he was sent down. So,
yeah. Well, it's exciting to be able to say we're going to get to Yamamoto pitch. We've been talking about it. And when Muncy and Edman returned, it basically did what we wanted it to do to the lineup in general. You're hoping that Yamamoto, when he comes back now, it's coming coming that same way. And it makes it all that more imperative for the Dodgers to, keep playing hard and trying to get a top 2 seed, because that extra 5 days that they get is one more bullpen or sim game or whatever for Yamamoto to get built up and hopefully, at least get into a 90-95 pitch range for a postseason start. So,
yeah. And speaking of postseason and standings and everything, while you were reading that first ad, the Padres walked off the Tigers in San Diego. So as of right now, the D-backs also won tonight. So the Dodgers are up by 5 on the D-backs and 4.5 on the Padres, I believe. I'm just looking to see. The Brewers lost, which is maybe the most important thing to the Dodgers right now, because that keeps the Dodgers 2 games ahead of the Brewers. 3 games ahead of the Brewers. And they have the tiebreaker. So that's like 4 games. So that's feeling pretty comfortable. The Phillies, did they win?
Phillies won.
Oh, there they are. Yeah, they beat the Blue Jays. So yeah, standings wise, obviously losing a game to both teams chasing you isn't ideal, but also that's why you build up a big lead so that you don't have to panic about every time you lose a game.
Yeah. So there's a lot of roster moves, a lot of them that we've already mentioned, but some of them that could impact the way the rest of this year goes and into October. So we're going to get into it. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Summer's wrapping up, but it's still hot out there. Sandals, sunscreen, and snacks for the kids are probably still some that you're getting this summer, but don't stress about the cost. Use Ibotta and get cash back on all your purchases when you stock up on all your summer essentials. And you can also take advantage because football season's coming up, which means that's Sunday barbecue season for some people. You can stock up on all your grilling favorites as well and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. You won't have to choose between burgers and hot dogs. You can get both. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, the flight you've been eyeing, or a Dodgers postseason ticket or two, if depending which games you go to. So right now, go check out the Ibotta app and see what you can save on, because they have over 2,400 brands and over 1,000 retailers available, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for trying it by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Want to thank you for being an everydayer if you are one. If you're not an everydayer, you can become one by listening or watching every day. If you're not ready for that type of commitment, you can just add an episode or two to your week. We're here for you every Monday through Friday, or every Sunday night through Thursday night, realistically, if you want to watch live on YouTube. So, we're not taking up too much of your time. And if you listen on a 2x speed, if you're a post listener, you can get done even faster. So go become an everydayer. You can also go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can get text directly from us. It's a few bucks a month. You can stay updated on any Dodger news, updates, rumors, and anything else that's going on with the team. So make sure to go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. All right, Jeff. Landon Knack, as you mentioned earlier, will essentially step into the rotation slot for Clayton Kershaw. I don't think it's really a surprise at this point, considering how Justin Robleski's last start went. And the fact of the matter is, the Dodgers were kind of waiting to call up Knack because he is out of options, right? So now he does have to stay on the 26-man.
He can be optioned one more time. He's been optioned 4 times this year. The one after the Korea series doesn't count. So they're at a point now where they're pretty safe because they can option him and call him back up one more time. If he gets optioned, he has to stay down for 15 days. So realistically, if they did need to send him down, they can, and it's not that big a deal. But chances are he's sticking around for, at least the medium term. Maybe when Glasnow comes back too, maybe he's gone. But at that point, who knows? But yeah, he'll be around for a little while at least.
Yeah, he's been decent overall. He has good numbers. Hasn't quite got as deep into games as maybe you'd want, but he's kept the Dodgers in pretty much all games that he's pitching. He hasn't really had, I don't think he's had one like implosion type start. So at the very least, he's giving you some consistency there for the Dodgers, and we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like. But we talked about Yamamoto coming back. We talked about potential roster moves and different things going on. Is there anything right now that you're kind of looking for, or a crunch that's coming up that you maybe don't know what's going to go on with the Dodgers?
There's a couple interesting things coming up. I was talking with a couple people on Twitter tonight about Edgardo Henriquez, looking at Michael Peterson just clearly not being a major league pitcher, at least he's not the caliber to be in a bullpen of a team that is hoping to win the World Series a month and a half from now. And that's, the Dodgers have Edgardo Henriquez, who's throwing 103 miles an hour in the minor leagues. He's moved up 4 levels. He's been, somewhere between good and dominant at all the levels. And so wondering about him, especially because he's a guy who he was actually Rule 5 eligible last year, last offseason. Nobody took him because he was recovering from Tommy John surgery. No way in the world he doesn't get taken this year. And so he will be added to the 40-man roster after this season. And so there's definitely a pretty reasonable school of thought saying, okay, if you've got guys like Michael Peterson and Brent Honeywell and these guys currently on the roster, why not give that 40-man roster spot now to a guy like Henriquez? it's a reasonable thought. And so I was thinking about that one and wondering if there's really a possibility that they would do that, because it would take some roster moves, because they do have Yamamoto, who they need a 40-man roster spot for. If Tony Gonsolin comes back this year, they need a 40-man roster spot for him. Obviously, they need 26-man spots for those guys, plus Tyler Glasnow, plus Brusdar Graterol. I don't know if they can make room, but I don't know that it's crazy, you know?
I was just looking up. Couldn't remember if they had moved Connor Brogdon to the 60-day, but they did. So he's just kind of sitting there in limbo. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those where if it comes down to it, there's still guys on the Dodgers roster that could be moved off the roster. You know, Brent Honeywell being one of those where realistically, you know, he's not going to be on the postseason roster. And if you want to try out a guy like Henriquez, you can find a way to get him on there. So we don't know what to expect if he did come up, but it would be pretty fun. Like we saw, I mean, just last night we saw Ben Joyce in his 105 mile an hour fastball and, you know, take care of the Dodgers in 10 pitches. And while Joyce wasn't like that when he first came up, he had flashes here and there, but this year he's really started to solidify himself as a legitimate reliever. And, you know, for the Dodgers, it's one of those things where anytime you're calling up a young guy, you're kind of just hoping flash in the pan, not for his career, but for the season, flash in the pan / teams have never seen him before, don't have that much video on him, and you're hoping it could work out. Like that was similar thoughts for me for Dalton Rushing when, you know, I thought maybe they could call him up and, you know, he doesn't need to come in and be a superstar. He needs to just come in and take advantage of maybe pitchers not really knowing him. And maybe, you know, we've seen a lot of guys come up, have a hot 3-4 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is, contribute, and then maybe kind of fall off once pitchers adjust to them. But when you call up someone right now in September, like you have 20 games, which you're not going to face the same team. You could face the Rockies. That's the only team you'll face twice. And realistically, not realistically, there's no shot the Rockies are going to play in October. So you can kind of have that type of effect.
Yeah, I wonder if some of this thinking about Henriquez maybe was because the Dodgers were playing the Angels, and those of us who are old enough to remember that in 2002, that's basically exactly what the Angels did. They had a flash in the pan reliever who was dominating the minor leagues, and they called him up, and he ended up dominating in the postseason and then dominating the big leagues for a decade. Francisco Rodriguez, he didn't make his major league debut until September 18th that year. And then he, you know, was a superstar in the postseason. Just, you know, went on to have a great career, obviously. Yeah, like, and then Dalton Rushing, kind of like you said, same kind of thing of, can he just come up and catch that lightning? I don't know. And Rushing is a harder one because finding a fit for him is even harder. A relief pitcher, you can call up a guy, make room on the roster, and then you can decide when to pitch him. Rushing would come up and either sit on the bench or move somebody else to the bench. And if you call him up, as you know, when you realize that Austin Barnes has turned back into a pumpkin for the 850th time in his career, you know, do you pull the plug on him or do you call up Rushing as an outfielder? And, you know, but then like, you're not going to, who are you going to sit for him? You know, because he can't play center field. He's a left fielder, and that's where Teoscar Hernandez plays. So, you know, there's so many obstacles here to really doing either of these moves, even before you get to the fact that Henriquez he walks about a batter every 2 innings. His walk rate's too high and probably not going to go down in the big leagues. So, you know, there's baseball reasons, and there's just roster logistics reasons why these guys are probably going to stay in the minor leagues.
Yeah. And the good part, well, can go either way, but the good part for the Dodgers is that if everyone does come out of everything healthy, come out of September, you got past everything in the regular season, and you do have guys fresh. Like Glasnow would be in theory a little bit fresher. Yamamoto would be in theory a little bit fresher. Guys like, you know, even Daniel Hudson, who got a 10-day break in the middle of August for, you know, without going on the injured list. That's 10 days where, you know, he got to rest a little bit and maybe had a little bit of rest that first time out, but been okay. You know, Blake Trinan went on the IL early. Like every guy's gone through something where they've had a little chance to rest. Freddie Freeman's got a chance to reset. way more than he ever has in his career in terms of not playing games. Mookie Betts also. So like, if there is something to that, we're already at the point where the Dodgers have made it through it. Like they're realistically going to win the division, and they're realistically going to be a top 2 seed. And now you can be like, okay, we're here now. We have the full squad. Now we can go out and play to the best of our abilities.
Yeah. And, I guess just throwing this out there, I am probably not alone in Dodger fandom thinking I'd probably rather have Edgardo Henriquez than Joe Kelly. It's like the same skill set, but at least we already know what to expect from Joe Kelly, and we don't really love the answer. And so, hey, how about a guy who throws harder and is at least we don't know for sure the answer right now. And he could be the roster loophole to get Henriquez onto the postseason roster. Say, oh yeah, he's taking Joe Kelly's spot. But yeah, it's funny how settled a lot of this roster is, and yet there's still some pretty big questions as far as what it's going to look like in the postseason because we don't know what to expect from Yamamoto and Glasnow, and we don't really know what the bullpen's going to look like.
Yeah, it's kind of like the roster coming into the regular season when the roster was settled. There was a few things here and there, and then we got the curveball last minute of Gavin Lux being moved to second base and all that type of stuff. This one's a little bit more health reasons why we don't know exactly what's going on, but it's exciting. Like it's regardless of the loss here on Wednesday, like, when the Angels have been bad, they've still played well against the Dodgers in the past. The Dodgers have finally really kind of taken it to them the last few years. But before that, I remember like the Dodgers would always lose to the Angels, and it'd be annoying because the Angels weren't good. But regardless of all that, like, it's exciting. You're getting Yamamoto back. Glasnow is seemingly on the cusp of return. Gratterall's on the cusp of return. You're going to see all these guys. The offense is healthy and for the most part been pretty good most days. Like we went through a lot this year as Dodger fans, and it's very much so on the scale of spoiled because you could be a White Sox fan who is rooting for it or against them, not breaking the loss record. But as a Dodger fan in a nutshell, like, it's been a lot that's happened, and we're sitting here now looking at it like, all right, the light's right there.
Yep, for sure.
All right, Jeff, you got anything else before we head out?
Just last thing, I just saw this pop across the Twitters just a minute or two ago. Giants extended Matt Chapman 6-year contract extension. It wipes out the last 2 years of his current deal, so he can't opt out. So he's in San Francisco for the next 6 years. So that'll be relevant at some point in the division over the next 6 years if the Giants decide to get good again. So
Farhan's last move, maybe. So
maybe.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Dodgers are off tomorrow, so we have a couple of ideas of topics, but if you have any or if you have any questions, you can always send those to us, and you'll find out all the ways you can send that right now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Check us out when we go live or on the audio feed in the next morning, or watch it on YouTube the next morning, or whatever you like to do. You can check out Locked On MLB podcast with our pal Sully. The link's in the description. It's brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, which also brings you Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 2 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you the biggest news and stories from the sports world and the LA sports world. The Locked On Dodgers postcast with host Pete Fox is available on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel live after most Dodger games. You can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff's on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vincents91. You can contact us there via DM. You can go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers Insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. Get text directly from us. It's a few bucks a month, and stay updated with your Dodgers if you're not on social media all day. And you can find us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, tear smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.